So what if I told you there's a simple, kind of counterintuitive principle that could help you get way more done by actually doing less? Well, today we're digging into exactly that, the 80-20 rule.
You know those days, right? We've all been there. You put in a full 8, 9, maybe even 10 hours. Your calendar is packed, you're bouncing from task to task, you've been busy. But then, at the end of the day, you kind of lean back and think, wait, what did I actually get done? And that feeling, that little bit of dread, it comes from a really common mix-up. See, there is a massive difference between being busy and being productive. We're kind of taught that if you just put in more hours, you'll get more results. But honestly, that's a myth. It's not about how much time you're clocking in, it's all about what you're doing with that time.
So how do we get out of this busy trap? Well, the key is this really powerful idea called the Pareto Principle. You've probably heard of it by its more famous name, the 80-20 rule.
So what is it? At its core, the Pareto Principle is stunningly simple. It says that for most things in life, about 80% of your results will come from just 20% of your efforts. Think about that for a second. It's a really simple idea, but the implications are huge.
And you know, the way this whole idea came about is actually pretty cool. It all started with an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. And he first noticed something a little weird in his garden. He saw that just 20% of his pea pods were actually producing 80% of all the peas. And this observation got him thinking, which led him to a much bigger discovery, that about 80% of the land in Italy was owned by only 20% of the people.
And it turns out, this wasn't just about peas or land. Once you start looking for this pattern, you start to see it everywhere. I mean, in almost every part of modern life. The whole idea hinges on this fundamental imbalance. This lopsided reality where a small number of things are responsible for the vast majority of the outcomes. Let's look at a few examples and you'll see what I mean.
Seriously, think about your closet right now. You probably wear about 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. For businesses, it's a known fact that 20% of their customers often bring in 80% of the revenue. Heck, even here on YouTube, a tiny fraction of videos, that vital 20%, is responsible for the lion's share of a channel's views. It's just everywhere. But okay, here it is. This is the real aha moment. If 20% of your effort gives you 80% of your results, the flip side is also true. That other 80% of your effort, what we can call the trivial many, is only giving you a tiny 20% of your results. This is the stuff that keeps us busy, but not productive. And the whole game is to shift your focus from the trivial many to the vital few.
Now, one quick thing to remember here. This isn't some magical, unbreakable law of the universe. The numbers aren't always going to be exactly 80 and 20. Sometimes it might be 90-10 or maybe 70-30. The exact numbers don't matter as much as the principle itself, that the majority of your results will almost always come from a minority of your causes.
All right, so now that we get the idea, let's get practical. How can we actually use this to, do more by focusing on less in our day-to-day lives? Let's start with something we all do, reading. Say you've got a nonfiction book you need to get through. You want that core knowledge, but you don't have endless hours. How does the 80-20 rule help you out?
Well, think about it like this. If that book takes 10 hours to read from cover to cover, the 80-20 rule would suggest you can probably get 80% of its key takeaways in just the first 2 hours. That last, final 20% of insight, that could cost you another 8 hours of reading. So you have to ask yourself, is that trade-off really worth it?
Okay, what about for all the students out there? Is it actually possible to get better grades without just studying more and pulling more all-nighters? The 80-20 rule says absolutely. Let's be real, an exam never covers 100% of the material from a course. It just doesn't. So the trick is to figure out which 20% of the topics are the most important, the ones most likely to show up. I promise you, spending 2 hours focused on the right material is going to get you a way better grade than spending a whole week on the wrong stuff. That is the definition of studying smarter, not harder. And believe it or not, this principle even applies to our social lives. Let's do a quick little Pareto analysis of our friendships. If you really truly think about it, you'll probably find that about 20% of your friends are the ones who provide 80% of your happiness, your joy, and your sense of fulfillment. The other 80%, they're more like friendly acquaintances. Now, this doesn't mean you go and cut people off. Not at all. It just means you should be intentional about investing more of your limited social energy into those vital few relationships that really give you the most back.
So, after all these examples, it really boils down to one central idea, right? It's all about finding, and then focusing on, your vital 20%. If you walk away remembering just one thing from all this, Let it be this simple phrase: the majority of results come from a minority of causes. That is the absolute heart of the 80-20 rule.
So here's your game plan. It's a simple 3-step process. First, in any area of your life, take a second to identify the 20% of things that are producing the biggest results. Second, focus way more of your time and energy on those things. And third, and this is the hard part, consciously start to cut back on the 80% of stuff that's just wasting your time for very little return.
So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. When you look at your own life, your work, your relationships, your hobbies, what are your vital few? What's the 20% that you're going to start doubling down on starting today?